Hello and welcome to English ESL Way with Mithika, and today we are going to study the chapter A Question of Trust, which was written by Victor Canning, who was a prolific British novelist and was famous for his thrill writing. So before we read this chapter, you should understand the theme, and before you understand the theme, you should understand the meaning of the proverb honor among thieves. Do you know what is this? Anybody? So it means that thieves will not steal from each other. In other words, that criminals observe a moral code of honor in that they do not do anything illegal to the partners in crime. But when we read this chapter, when we'll read this story, you would realize that the story is representing an opposite idea. So, if you're ready, let's find out how this happens in the story. Everyone thought that Horace Denby was a good, honest citizen. He was about 50 years old and unmarried, and he lived with a housekeeper who worried over his health. So, everyone means here is everybody around him used to think that Horace Denby is a good and honest man. And Horace Denby was 50 years old man and was unmarried and lived with his housekeeper who used to worry about his health. In fact, he was usually very well and happy except for attacks of hay fever in summer. He made locks and was successful enough at his business to have two helpers. So, although he was fit and fine, but used to have hay fever attacks in summer. Do you know what is a hay fever is? A hay fever is an allergy caused by pollen or dust in which the mucous membranes of the eyes and nose are inflamed, causing running at the nose and watery eyes. So he used to suffer because of this fever and he was unhappy about it. He used to make locks and used to earn a profit that was quite enough for him to hire two helpers for his work of making locks. 15 years ago, Horace had served his first and only sentence in prison library. He loved rare, expensive books, so he robbed a safe every year. Each year he planned carefully just what he would do, stole enough to last for 12 months, and secretly bought the books he loved through an agent. So everybody used to think of him as a good and honest citizen, but nobody knew that he had gone to jail about 15 years ago and served his sentence in the prison library. And so what happened due to that, he got his love for rare and expensive books from there. Now it became an inevitable thing for him to stop reading. So what did he start? He started to steal money that would last him for an year, and with the rest of the money he used to buy books through a secret agent. Now walking in the bright July sunshine, he felt sure that this year's robbery was going to be as successful as all the others. For 2 weeks he had been studying the house at Shotover Grange, looking at its room, its electric wiring, its paths, and its garden. So this year, while walking during the summers of July, he was quite sure that he would steal as easily without getting caught as he used to do every other summer. And the question is why he was so sure. The answer lies in he studied the house for over 2 weeks and he had been studying even the smallest details such as electric wiring, its paths, its garden area. So he was so sure about that he would not be caught. This afternoon, the two servants who remained in the Grange while the family was in London had gone to the movie. Horace saw them go. So that specific day when he was about to steal the money from that house, the servants who were supposed to stay back in the house when the family went to London, they went out for a movie. And Horace saw them leaving. He felt happy in spite of a little tickle of hay fever in his nose. He came out from behind the garden wall, his tools carefully packed in a bag on his back. So when Horace saw the servants leaving, and he was happy instead of being worried about the tickle in his nose due to the hay fever. I told you now that he was suffering from a hay fever problem. And he then left with a bag that had his tools, and he entered the house from the wall behind the garden. There were about 15,000 pounds worth of jewels in the grand safe. If he sold them one by one, he expected to get at least 5,000, enough to make him happy for another year. There were 3 very interesting books coming up for sale in the autumn. Now he would get the money he wanted to buy them. So the question is, what amount of money was there according to Horace? Yes, it was 15,000 pounds. And where it was in the Grand's safe. Okay, so what did he think of doing with that money? He thought that even if he sold them one by one, he would get how much money? At least 5,000 pounds. That he would keep him happy and content for one more year. And he also thought about one more thing. What was that? He thought about 3 books that were coming in the autumn, and thought that he would have the money needed to buy these books if he robbed that particular house. He had seen the housekeeper hang the key to the kitchen door on a hook outside. He put on a pair of gloves, took the key, and opened the door. He was always careful not to leave any fingerprints. So what did he see? He saw that the housekeeper of the Grange hung the keys. Where? She was hanging on the hook outside the kitchen door. So he took the key and he put on his gloves on his hands so that not to leave any fingerprints. And he opened the door of Grange and used to be very careful about the fingerprints. A small dog was lying in the kitchen. It stirred, it made a noise and moved its tail in a friendly way. "All right, Sherry," Horace said as he passed. All you had to do to keep the dogs quiet was to call them by their right names and show them love. So when the Horace entered the house, what did he see? He saw a dog. Where he was lying in the kitchen. So when Horace entered the house, the dog got alarmed and he made some noise. He moved a little bit, and after a while he moved his tail in a friendly way when Horace called by the name of the dog, "All right, Sherry, all right, Sherry." And why did the Horace call the name of the dog? Because Horace knew that the trick to keep the dogs quiet was to call them by their names, and if you show them a bit of love, they would allow you to go in the house without any trouble. So he started calling out, "All right, Sherry, all right, Sherry." So this was a kind of trick he played on the dog to enter the house. The safe was in the drawing room behind a rather poor painting. Horace wondered for a moment whether he should collect pictures instead of books, but they took up too much room. In a small house, books were better. So after collecting the keys, he straightaway went to the drawing room because he knew that the safe was in drawing room. And where it was? It was behind a poor painting. So when he was looking at the painting, he thought for a moment. He started thinking something. So what did he think? He thought that it would be better if he collect picture instead of books. But another moment he gave another thought that he had a small house and picture would take larger space, so better he would collect the books only. There was a great ball of flowers on the table, and Horace felt his nose tickle. He gave a little sneeze and then put down his bag. He carefully arranged his tools. He had 4 hours before the servants returned. The safe was not going to be hard to open. After all, he had lived with locks and safes all his life. The burglar alarm was poorly built. He went into the hall and to cut its wire. He came back and sneezed loudly as the smell of flowers came to him again. So then he moved forward and he smelled a ball of flowers on the table, and his nose started to tickle because he had a hay fever, and the smell of flowers tickled his nose. His nose started running and he sneezed a little. Then he put down his bag safely and he arranged his tools because he knew that he might need those tools to do the robbery safely, and he also knew that it would take 4 hours the servants to come back, and he had enough time to do his work. And one good thing was that it would not be difficult for him to open the safe because he had been into a business of locks and safes, or we could say he had lived his life with safes and locks. And after this, he went into the hole to cut out the wires of the burglar system, which was not the good one, which was poorly built. And when he was returning, he sneezed loudly. Why did he do so? Because that smell of flowers came to him again. How foolish people are when they own valuable things. Horace thought. A magazine article had described this house, giving a plan of all the rooms and a picture of this room. The writer had even mentioned that the painting hid a safe. But Horace found that the flowers were hindering him in his work. He buried his face in his handkerchief. So while working, he was thinking to himself that how foolish rich people were when they had valuable things, and how easy it was for him to carry out the robbery of this house, because the whole plan of the house, including the information about the safe, was mentioned in the magazine article about the safe, and everything was mentioned there. But one thing which was troubling him a lot was that smell of flour, which was constantly making him sneeze loudly. So he put a handkerchief on his face and continued his work. Then he heard a voice say from the doorway, "What is it? A cold or hay fever?" Before he could think, Horace said, "Hay fever," and found himself sneezing again. So then somebody from the doorway asked him that was it a cold or was it a hay fever? Horace, without thinking anything, he quickly replied, "Hay fever," and sneezed again. The voice went on, "You can cure it with a special treatment, if you find out just what plant gives you the disease. I think you'd better see a doctor. If you were serious about your work, I heard you from the top of the house just now." So the other lady who was at the doorway continued and told the Horace that he could cure this problem of hay fever if he knew which flower caused this allergy, and that he should also see a doctor if he wanted to be a good thief about his work, means about his thief work. And then lady said she was here because his sneezing could be heard from the top floor of the house. It was a quiet, kindly voice, but one with firmness in it. A woman was standing in the doorway, and Sherry was rubbing against her. She was young, quite pretty, and was dressed in red. She walked to the fireplace and straightened the ornaments there. So the Horace is explaining, the voice was calm and firm. Then he got a bit nervous as he saw a woman standing in the doorway. And he described the woman. The woman was young, pretty, and dressed in red color. As she walked towards him and arranged the decoration which was kept on the fireplace, "Down, Sherry," she said. "Anyone would think I had been away for a month." She smiled at Horace and went on, "However, I came back just in time, though I didn't expect to meet a burglar." Horace had some hope because she seemed to be amused at meeting him. He might avoid trouble if he treated her the right way. He replied, "I didn't expect to meet one of the family." So, when the lady was on the doorway, she ordered the dog to stay away and said that people might be thinking that she was away for a month, but she was back in time and didn't expect a burglar to welcome her back at her house. Horace was a bit hopeful listening to the words of the lady because as he saw that woman was amused, not panicking on seeing a burglar. He thought that if he treated her well and didn't do anything wrong, then she might let him go. He also told her amusingly that he also didn't expect to meet a family member either, as he had thought there was no one at home. She nodded. I see what an inconvenience it is for you to meet me. What are you going to do? Horace said, my first thought was to run, of course. You could do that, but I would telephone the police and tell him all about you, and they would get you at once. Then she said that she realized what an inconvenience she was to Horace, and also asked him that what would he do now. Then to this Horace replied, at first he wanted to run away. The woman replied that he could do so, but if he did so, she would call the police and let them know that there was a man robbing her house and they would easily catch him. Horace said, I would of course cut the wires first, and then he hesitated and a smile on his face. I would make sure that you could do nothing for some time. A few hours would be enough. She looked at him seriously. You would hurt me? Then Horace replied that if she did so, she made a call to police to catch him up. He would obviously cut the telephone wires first and then he would do something to her so that she could not do anything for a few hours. And then to this, that lady looked at him seriously and asked him that would he hurt her? Horace paused and then said, I think I was trying to frighten you. When I said that, you didn't frighten me, Horace suggested. It would be nice if you would forget you ever saw me and let me go. The voice was suddenly sharp. Why should I? You were going to rob me. If I let you go, you will only rob someone else. Society must be protected from men like you. So Horace replied to the question of the lady that he would hurt her. Then he replied that he was just saying that to frighten her. She was not frightened by what he said, and Horace then told her that it would be better that she forgot that she ever saw him and let him go. Suddenly the lady got mad at him and she spoke in a sharp and loud voice that why should she let him go? He was there to her, and if she spared him, he would go and rob someone else. She said that the society needed to be protected from people like him. Horace smiled. I'm not a man who threatens society. I steal only for those who have a lot of money. I steal for a very good reason, and I hate the thought of prison. She laughed and he begged, thinking that he had persuaded her. Look, I have no right to ask you for anything, but I'm desperate. Let me go, and I promise never to do this kind of thing again. I really mean it. She was silent, watching him closely. Then she said, You are really afraid of going to prison, aren't you? So Horace smiled and said that he was not a threat to a society, and as he stole only from those people who had a lot of money, also he stole for a good reason. What could be that good reason? Remember, he wanted to collect books and he hated even the thought of going to a prison because he was in prison where he developed the love for reading, but now he hated that part. So the lady laughed at his reply and he was begging her not to call the police. lady was quite smart, and Horace was begging and only trying to convince her that she would let him go, and he was desperately asking the woman not to go to the police, and he also made her promised her that surely stop robbing people and all that. He promised her and told her that he meant what he said. Then cleverly the lady looked closely towards him, observing him how frightened he was, and asked him that was he really afraid of going to prison. She came over to him shaking her head. I have always liked the wrong kind of people. So she came near to Horace and she shook her head and said she always liked the wrong kind of people. And you know what was that? This was a clear indication for Horace that she was also a thief. But he was so frightened, and why he was so frightened? Because he was terrorized by that lady, that she would call a police, and she would not let him go outside because he would rob other people. So he didn't pick up that clue that the lady herself was also a thief. She picked up a silver box from the table and took a cigarette from it. Horace, eager to please her and seeing that she might help him, took off his gloves and gave her his cigarette lighter. You will let me go. He held the lighter towards her. Yes, but only if you will do something for me. Anything you say. And then the woman picked up a cigarette box which was made up of silver lying on the table and took out a cigarette. And Horace was thinking something. He was thinking to please that lady. But what was the reason he was thinking to please that lady? Because he was considering that lady to be a part of family. He didn't have any idea that that particular lady was a thief. So he was thinking to please her, and he was thinking that if he pleased her, then she might help him. So what he did, he quickly took off his gloves and gave her his cigarette lighter. And then he politely asked him that if she would let him go and pointed the lighter towards her cigarette. The lady was very clever. She replied that yes, she would let him go, but only if she would do something that she wanted. And Horace quickly replied that he would do anything for her. Before we left for London, I promised my husband to take my jewels to our bank, but I left them here in the safe. I want to wear them to a party tonight, so I came down to get them. But Horace smiled. You have forgotten the number to open the safe, haven't you? Yes, replied the young lady. So the lady was making up a story before Horace, and she said that before going to London, she had promised her husband that she would put all the jewelry in the bank, but left in the safe at the Grange. So she had to go to a party today, and then she hesitated a little. Before she could speak anything, Horace smiled and said, and she had forgotten the code of the locker. To this, the lady replied, yes, she had actually forgotten the code of the locker. Actually, Horace was making the things easy for the lady. Just leave it to me and you will have them within an hour. But I'll have to break your safe. Don't worry about that. My husband won't be here for a month and I'll have the safe mended by that time. So the Horace assured the lady that he would do it, but he would have to break the locker. To which the lady replied that he need not to worry about that. Her husband won't return before a month, and that she would get it repaired by then. So she had enough time. He need not to worry about that. He could break the locker. And within an hour, Horace had opened the safe, given her the jewels, and gone happily away. So Horace broke open the safe within an hour and gave her the jewels she wanted and left happily thinking that he was safe now. For 2 days he kept his promise to kind young lady. On the morning of third day, however, he thought of the books he wanted and he knew he would have to look for another safe,
But he never got the chance to begin his plan. By noon, a policeman had arrested him for the jewel robbery at Shotover Grange. His fingerprints, for he had opened the safe without glass, were all over the room, and no one believed him when he said that the wife of the owner of that house had asked him to open the safe for her. The wife herself, a grey-haired, sharp-tongued woman of 60, said that the story was nonsense. For 2 days, Horace kept his promise to the lady he made that he won't steal, but on the third day he thought about the books he wanted. He was so desperate to read them and started thinking that he would have to look for another locker to steal from. He couldn't even get the time to plan the next robbery and he was arrested. Why he was arrested? Police officer came to his house and arrested him, saying that his fingerprints were all over the Shotover Grange. No one believed him. He told them the story that the lady herself asked her to break the safe, but no one was trying to believe him that the actual wife of the owner was an old woman who was 60 years old and was a sharp-tongued woman. And she said that the story was nonsense because she had never met Horace, and not to think of asking him to break open the safe. So it was clear to him now that the lady he met was not the wife of the owner, she was a thief. Horace is now the assistant librarian in the prison. He often thinks of the charming, clever young lady who was in the same profession as he was and who tricked him. He gets very angry when anyone talks about honor among thieves. So he clearly understood that the lady was not the owner's wife, she was a thief like him, and Horace became the assistant librarian at the jail because of her. And when he used to think about him, that woman who, being from the same profession, tricked him and got him caught, he gets very angry when somebody talks about that kind of honor among thieves thing. So this is all about this chapter. If you still have any query, you can put that in the comment box. I'll definitely get back to you. Happy studies. Bye bye.